So we're going to talk a little bit about employer free speech and captive audience bans. So you're sitting in Illinois, which is a
Right.
state that's passed one of these captive audience bans. But talk a little bit about, I mean, first of all, just sort of your general view of these captive audience bans. Maybe explain a little bit. Why don't we start there? Just explain a little bit about what is a captive audience ban.
Okay, so when I started my career, for years, it was always the case that employers could hold mandatory meetings to talk about, the pros and cons of unionization, inform their employees about voting, et cetera, up until the 24-hour period immediately preceding the election. So, you could do it up until basically the whole day before. You're allowed to have these mandatory meetings, meaning that you could discipline employees for not attending or, penalize them in some way for not attending. And very early on in my career, I worked for another firm that was very well known for its kind of scorched earth union busting techniques. They were actually very proud of it. It was in their marketing literature.
Mm.
And so I learned that's some of what I learned very early on was kind of this scorched earth. We're having mandatory meetings. We're firing anybody who doesn't show up. We're going to discipline them if they don't come to this meeting. Listen to us talk. And I have to say, over time, my perspective on that changed quite a bit to the point that I don't know what message it sends to an employee when you tell them, come listen to me and trust me and vote for me, or I will discharge you.
Mm-hmm.
And I will
Right.
fire you or I'll discipline you. And so many years ago, kind of pivoted to making these meetings voluntary. You basically saying to employees, we're going to have a meeting. This is what we're going to talk about. You can either choose to attend or you can continue to work during that time period. I will say, most employees would rather take a break,
Mm-hmm.
for 20 minutes or whatever it is to come in. We'll get to it in a little bit, but it is a little bit vague, the Illinois law, and it's pretty expansive in its language, and it's a little bit vague as to whether you can still do even that is considered voluntary. But again, these meetings were always, considered totally acceptable, that you were allowed to have them. And now, Illinois has put into place this ban, which we can talk about.
Yeah. So I guess just to be clear, under the federal law, the National Labor Relations Act, at this point, that has not changed. An employer still has a right to, if they want to mandate attendance at a meeting. I think you raise a really important point. Like, do you really need to mandate attendance at a meeting? And I think you're right. Like, generally, you don't.